You are listening to the Stand Out Now podcast with your host, Dave Mendonca. Check out each episode as top experts share their proven marketing, publicity, and sales tips to help you cut through the advertising noise so you can reach your ideal clients, get noticed, and connect with powerful influencers. The Stand Out Now podcast is brought to you by podcastinterviewexperts.com, helping entrepreneurs attract clients through business podcast guest appearances.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for listening. Our guest is a former CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC guest booker who now owns a thriving New York-based PR agency called Pace Public Relations. Annie Scranton, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, Annie, here's a question I always start with. When you were a kid, what marketing or sales strategies, knowingly or unknowingly, did you use to get what you wanted?
Well, getting good grades was really important to my parents. And so I learned at a pretty young age that if I was able to get good grades and get an A on a test or on my report card, that I could use it as leverage for spending more time playing with friends or having sleepovers or things like that. So I sort of just intuitively knew that my parents would be happy by the good grades, and that I could use it to do some stuff that I wanted to do.
Okay, this is a good one, Annie. Okay, so let's get a more deep dive into this. Okay, so Annie gets like an A on like some sort of assignment when she's a kid. What was like the big thing that you leveraged that grade to get you something? What was that thing you wanted?
Probably it was the one that stands out in my mind is like my first sleepover. And it was probably maybe about 10 or so. And I remember there was a bunch of girls going and had sort of overprotective parents who were not as into the idea of sleepovers. And nice. I just, for whatever reason, and I just remember that I was going to go to this sleepover no matter what. I knew that if I could sort of present it as, but I got all A's, I did whatever I was supposed to do, that, you know, I would likely be able to go. That was the big moment, my first big sleepover.
Well done, Annie. Well done. That's awesome. So the topic of leverage. Okay, so that's the thing I took away from that story of yours. So using leverage, like growing up when you're a teenager and you're getting jobs and whatnot, like, did you use leverage at all, getting jobs as a teenager in your early 20s as well?
Well, I think getting jobs when I was a teenager, probably not as much because my jobs were somewhat, just standard, typical, like teenage kind of jobs. But I definitely found the idea of leverage more useful as I was doing like internships when I was in college, and the leverage was real. It was legitimate as it pertained to me going to these interviews and describing my coursework and sort of, what I had learned during my studies and what I had learned on campus jobs and activities. And I think that leverage is kind of what it's all about. When you have something you want, you have to present your case in a way that's going to make the other person understand that they need you. Mm-hmm. And so that is just something that I think, I certainly used to my advantage specifically more when I was going through some of those internships.
For sure. Now, Annie, when you were growing up, what kind of career dreams did you have?
I always wanted to be Katie Couric on the Today Show. My mom and dad and I would watch that every morning before school, having breakfast. And I just thought being an on-air newscaster was probably the greatest job ever. And I loved Katie Couric. We all did. Everybody did. The whole country did. And I really wanted to be her. I learned pretty early on in my 20s that in 99.9% of the cases to achieve that level or even any level really of TV broadcast journalism stardom would require a start somewhere in the middle of the country in a much smaller city and state. And having grown up just outside of New York City, I realized it wasn't something that I wanted as badly as I thought I did, because I was not willing to leave New York and to move out of that area. And so I kind of pivoted in my career and decided to work more behind the scenes as a producer.
Interesting. So was that a tough choice to make? Because you're talking about how much you really admired her and you were on the path, but it really was just a matter of geography. You just weren't willing to make that sacrifice to go to like Wyoming or something, to like plow your trade there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had to weigh my decision, and it was hard in a way because I did always sort of have this idea that I would be on air as someone reporting the news. But once I got familiar with producing and sort of learning about how a TV show comes together and how news productions work, I quickly became just as interested in the production part and in guest booking and producing. And so I sort of said to myself, well, why don't I just work in New York for a year or two as a production assistant, get national TV experience, get to meet, some real heavy hitters. And then I can decide at that juncture if I still want to pursue the on-camera route or if I would prefer to stay working behind the scenes. And, as it turned out, working behind the scenes it wound up suiting me better.
For sure. Now, I mentioned in your intro that you've worked for some heavy hitting like TV networks like CNN, Fox News and whatnot. So how did you get those opportunities? You were like guest booking for some of these places. How did you market yourself? Was it internships? How did it work?
Yeah, I went to Smith College, which is a liberal arts school, and most liberal arts schools don't have a broadcast division or even a journalism division. My degree was in English, which is great. You have to know how to write to do most jobs, but the on the ground experience for any job in journalism or broadcast journalism really comes from on the ground experience. So it was really, to your point, those internships that I had that were able to provide the leverage to me getting hired in my first job. And so having worked, one of my first internships was with WABC, the local ABC affiliate in New York. And I was involved in the day-to-day production of how those newscasts come together. And having that experience working on the ground, I interned for a local paper in New Jersey another summer and got to actually do real local reporting for the paper and got to have some bylines that were published. So it was that kind of experience that certainly when I went in for my first interviews in TV and at newspapers, I was able to call upon that real experience. And I'm pretty sure that's what helped push me over the edge over other candidates.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Now, can you paint a picture of the newsroom environments? I've had the opportunity as well to work in intense newsroom environments. So what about you? Like you're like early 20s, you're working in this different newsrooms. What were they like?
Newsrooms are pretty intense, but it does vary from show to show because whoever the anchor is of that show and then the executive and senior producers play a large role in setting the tone for how the group works together cohesively. So, everybody's got different personalities, right? So some anchors are more chill, and others can be more high strung. It's also a kind of situation where depending on what's actually happening that day, meaning is there major breaking news, that can also dictate sort of the tone and the feel amongst the whole team. So, there's countless times when, say, I'm working on a TV show that airs from 7 to 8 p.m. at night, and it's 6 p.m., the show is more or less set. Everybody's just finishing getting the last little bits of their segment put together. And then all of a sudden there's some major event that breaks, some major breaking news. Then the entire show has to get blown up and redone on the fly with an hour, sometimes even less than that to spare. Sometimes it's happening during the hour, that you're live on the air. And so those are more the moments when it can be stressful and people are kind of not yelling in a mean way, but just like, we need to get such and such on the air? You know, do you have this element? Do you have this piece of video? And so that's really more when that kind of high energy, like sort of typical what you think of newsrooms kind of comes to mind.
Right. How did you yourself handle all that?
I think, you know, when I started out and I was obviously the low man on the totem pole, so to speak, I think I just kept my head down and did whatever I needed to do quickly and well. You know, when you're first starting out in TV or probably any job, the only thing you want to be known for is getting things done well and getting them done quickly. And so I just tried to learn by osmosis as much as I can. I tried to figure out who could be my allies, you know, that if I did have a question, I could go to and ask quickly and be met with a kind and thoughtful response. And I just tried really hard to recognize my role in sort of as one small cog in the wheel that is this TV production. And you know, at the end of the day, every single person on a TV show is really important. Yeah. And so executing my role well is an important part. So I think I just tried as hard as I could not to take anything personally and just get it done as well as I could. For sure.
So this is the gossip portion of the podcast. You mentioned high-strung anchors. Anyone in particular?
I don't think I'm going to name anyone by name on that in particular.
Okay.
But I worked with some of the biggest names like Geraldo and Deborah Norville and Dan Abrams and Donnie Deutsch, you know, Jane Velez Mitchell, really Erin Burnett. I worked for so many different anchors and everybody has their own personalities and their own quirks. And you could probably, if you're interested, probably Google and find out.
Spoken like a true PR professional. Thank you, Annie.
That's right.
Awesome. So what's cool is about your background in TV, it was really a nice segue into PR because you have that insider knowledge of how TV and media works. So when was it that time when you thought to yourself, hey, you know what, PR is the way to go?
Well, there was an actual moment that happened to me. I was at CNBC working as a guest producer, and the show I was working on got canceled. So I did what any 29-year-old girl would do. I cried and called my mom. And then after I got through the shock of getting let go from my first job ever, I sent out sort of a mass email to all of my contacts, everyone I know, saying, I just lost my job. If you hear of anything, let me know. Met with a response that actually sort of changed the course of my entire career. A publicist who I had worked with previously in booking his clients on the CNBC show I was on said, I don't know if you've ever dabbled in PR, but I have sort of a unique proposition for you. If you can help me book my client, who is the stock market guy, he just wrote a book on the markets, on investing. If you could get him booked on any CNBC show in the next week or two, I'll pay you $500. So actually, he looked good. I checked him out. He seemed legit. I sent his info to my friend who was producing for a dayside show on CNBC. And she said, oh, he looks great. Can he join us in 2 days? And so just like that, I not only made what was a lot of money to me at the time, but I also realized that I had a different skill set that I had never realized before. And that was that I was uniquely positioned to help people get booked and to get media interviews, not only because I understood how the different shows worked and operated and the types of guests they were looking for, but also because I had worked at so many networks over my career. I had a lot of contacts inside these shows. And that's really what PR, especially when you're booking for TV, comes down to, is having those personal connections. So PR was never something that I ever even thought about until that exact moment, but it became obviously my career and a big part of my life.
That's amazing. Some great takeaways, Andy, that I just got from that. Email list, like your contacts. Guys, you're listening to this podcast, you have to get an email list because it's your direct route to people. Like, say, for some reason, all social media gets destroyed. We know it's not going to happen, but With an email list, it's your direct connection. So Annie got that. So, and you accumulated that email list over the years through your various stops in the media industry. And then Annie was a good person. She was great to work with. So that guy approaches you about working for him for a bit. He wouldn't have done that, Annie, if you didn't provide him some sort of value, right? Booking his clients on CNBC shows. So right away, email list, be a good person, provide value, love it.
I mean, what I always try to be mindful of and what I tell my staff and anyone who I'm talking to about business kind of stuff is that, to your point, it's all about providing value. And so I always think of that. How am I providing value to my clients? How am I providing value to my staff? How are they providing value to the work that we're doing? And I think if you are helpful, kind, and, are responsive and sort of pay attention to the details of what you're doing, then people will hopefully remember you. And when there's an opportunity like the one I had, then hopefully those kinds of doors will open.
Exactly. You created that opportunity for yourself. So that's amazing, Annie. So talk about early on, Pace Public Relations. You're like, okay, you know what? I can make this something, right? So how did you promote yourself early on? Was it just you reaching out to former contacts? Like you mentioned that email you sent out.
Yeah. So what wound up happening was that I got actually a full-time job probably the very next week, luckily, at another TV network. And while I was working there, I kept doing a little bit of the PR stuff on the side. And what was really advantageous for me was that working in TV and being gainfully employed not only was able to make me feel unworried about money because I had a full-time job, which is something I always tell to, rising entrepreneurs is like, if there's a way to sort of go out on your own where you're not just so worried and anxious about money all the time, like kind of make something that's your side hustle, work towards making that your full-time job, because that's sort of what I did. But I was able to really spread the word because I would be with different clients in the green room, and I would have other publicists reaching out to me saying, can I buy you a drink? Can we meet, etc. So I was just uniquely in a position where I was coming in contact with lots and lots of different people every day. And so by being able to spread the word in person to people, but then of course reaching out over email, reaching out on social media and telling people what I was doing, that absolutely is what helped, me spread the word and get known by people. And at that point, I wasn't even incorporated. I didn't have a website. I was just totally doing things like on the side, but it definitely grew from there.
Awesome. Like Annie, like the New York PR world is intensely competitive. So the fact that it goes to show there's clients for everybody out there. You just put in the work, you get out there, you meet people. That's a lot of it, right?
There's no way to skirt around hard work. And that I have been in business for 9 years. And in many ways, I'm working harder than I ever have before. But the payoff is so rewarding and I truly enjoy it. And that's the other thing. It's like, if you don't really, really enjoy what you do every day, you're not going to get very far if you're thinking about starting your own business, because you have to have the passion and you have to have the drive for it.
For sure. And you were talking about how you did your PR stuff sort of as a side hustle to start. So there are some listeners out there who maybe do have a full-time job and they're thinking of doing that business on the side kind of thing, the side hustle. Like, how'd you do yours? Like, how'd you, I guess, schedule the time for you to work on the PR stuff? Because you have the 9 to 5. Was it maybe work on it 10 minutes a day kind of thing? Like, how did that work?
Well, sort of like PR is one of those things where you can always kind of be working on it because you're spreading the word and you're meeting new connections. But what I would do is I was on a show that was on the air at 7 p.m. live. So I didn't need to be in the office until 11. So I had a lot of time in the morning where I could, be on my own networking and meeting people and kind of spreading the word. So I was able to sort of segment my day into doing that. But also, when I would be walking to the cafeteria, I'd make a phone call. When I would grab a cup of coffee, I might meet somebody and meet them for 20 minutes in the middle of my day. So I was able to find pockets of time, and that's really what it comes down to is it's easy to say, I don't have the time. I just don't have the time to do this. And you truly may not, but if you want to start a business, you have to find the time. It's just like, and I mean, and particularly when I first went on my own, I mean, I worked probably 14-hour days every single day. You know, it was sometimes longer than that, but it was a true passion. So it never really felt like work, so to speak.
Right. You know what? I'm a firm believer in having that positive obsession. That to me is the only way to make an endeavor like this work. You call it passion, you could call it obsession. If you don't have that determination, like the first obstacle, you're just going to be blown away. You're going to be so jilted and jarred that you won't want to go further. But you're showing with your path that you want it. You're going to network. You're going to make those calls. You're going to, I guess, squeeze every ounce of time in the 24-hour day to make it work. And that's what it takes.
Well, and I think in this day and age too, like there's not really too many professions where you go into an office and work, and then when you leave, you actually don't work anymore until you return the next day. In my line of work, I'm sort of always working, which is what I was talking about earlier. And what I mean by that is it's not just like the connectivity part. Okay, everyone has their phones and, you know, we can reply to emails at any point. But it's that when you have a passion for something, you sort of embody it. That's what I try to do. I try to just, it's something I almost can't even turn off at this point. When I meet somebody new, or when I go into a new restaurant, or when I'm reading something in a magazine, I'm always thinking about the PR behind it. Who's doing their PR? You know, wow, they could be a good fit for this magazine. Or I'm reading an article online and I'm thinking, oh, this section could be really great for one of our clients. And I think that openness, seeing it not as a detractor, like, oh, this is messing up my personal time, actually seeing it in the opposite way, that this is what a gift. It's really cool that I'm able to look at all of these different situations and relate it back to my line of work and the business that I formed. For
sure. Definitely. Some of the listeners, maybe they're not in the position to hire their own publicist. So say they want to be on a TV show or some form of media. What are some like general tips you can give in regards to crafting a pitch? Like say they're coming in cold, right? And they're sending an email to a media outlet, say to like an assignment editor at a TV station. What would that email look like?
First, it should be very short and very brief. I don't think anybody has the time or the attention span anymore to read things that are long. So that's number one, like 2 or 3 extremely short paragraphs at most. Number 2, make sure that you, prior to sending an email to the producer of a show or an assignment desk editor at a network or a print journalist, make sure that you actually watch the show that you're pitching, or that you read articles by that specific reporter so you understand the types of stories and topics that are of interest. The third is that, usually speaking, it's much harder to get a segment booked like all about your company or all about your brand or all about this new product that you've launched. A lot of times what we do is try to position our clients as thought leaders or experts who can speak about like a relevant trend in the space. So if you launched a new travel company, maybe the pitch isn't about the travel company, but maybe it's about a new study that you read that said more people are taking vacations at this particular time of year, or, this particular city has seen a boost in the economy because of tourism. And then figure out how to work in your brand or your company as an example of that trend. That way it's seen as less promotional, not like an advertisement, and is seen more as content that will be useful to the potential viewer or reader.
Great advice, Annie. It's so terrible when I see guests on shows, whether it's a podcast or TV show, and it's basically an infomercial. It's brutal. So those are some great tips there. Awesome. All right, Annie. So okay, say the listener books an appearance on, say, a TV show. How would you coach them to provide some sort of value to the audience, but also make sure there's proper messaging about their brand?
Well, the first thing is and most producers and media do this, but to make sure that the segment producer is going to introduce you as the founder of your company, and that is going to be your chyron throughout the interview. The chyron is the actual text that's on the screen, in the bottom of the screen, where it would say like Annie Scranton, CEO, Pace Public Relations. So to make sure you talk to the producer and those two things are taken care of. Secondly, make sure you send over to the producer any relevant assets, meaning if you have videos that are relating back to the segment, you have photographs that you want to share, any assets that can be seen that they could show visually during the segment that will relate back to your business. The third is that it's very important that during an interview that you make sure you follow the lead and the cues of the reporter. Everybody wants to talk for 4 minutes, all about their business and all about their brand and all about what they do. But that will, generally speaking, not be the segment that you're booked for. It's going to be more about a bigger story in the space that you are seen as a thought leader on. It's important to remember to just stay on track, because you're going to be getting the press from doing the interview and getting the recognition in the intro. But if there are times where it's relevant for you to lead into your answer by saying, actually, at our company, this is something that we do. And you can kind of relate it back to the question that you had just been previously asked. That's okay. But you want to be really mindful of not being overly pushy about your brand on air.
Beautiful. You've done this before.
Yeah.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have done it. I've done a few interviews myself and have coached countless clients on how to give a good interview. So yes.
Awesome, Annie. Fantastic. Listen, this has been terrific. How can the audience find out more about you and Pace Public Relations?
You can visit us on our website, which is pacepublicrelations.com. You can find us on all forms of social media by searching for Pace Public Relations or by my name, Annie Scranton.
Awesome. Annie, thank you for being on the podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Everybody, thank you for checking out the episode. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Stand Out Now podcast. Don't forget to rate and review our show on iTunes. Also, you can find out more about our program at thestandoutnowpodcast.com. Thanks again, and have a great week.